Folks, I think we're going to get started. I want to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton, archived temporarily on our website. Other individuals and media may also audibly and or visually record this meeting. As well, a reminder about electronic devices. Approval of the agenda. Madam Clerk, any changes?
Yes, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, there are changes. Item 10.2, which is the BIA Advisory Committee report. Item 9 should read Stony Creek, not Barton Village BIA. As well, item 10.6, the Barton Village Improvement Area Proposed 2019 Budget and Schedule of Payment, PED 18243. There's a copy and paste error in this report as well. Subsections A and B, where it reads International Village, should read Barton Village. Item 10.10, the rugby franchise at Tim Hortons Field, PW 18094. Staff have withdrawn this report from the agenda at this time, but are anticipating a new report to come forward in February, I believe. Added 10.13, the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, PW 18097. Added report HUR 18020, which would be 10.14, the 2019 budget submission for the Advisory Committee for Persons with Disabilities. An added notice of motion, which is item 12.1, appointment of members of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board of Directors. And just a note for item 8.1, the delegation from Dr. Patrick Dean. He had an appointment come up. He is still coming, but probably won't make it till 9:45 or 10. Oh, my apologies. He's waving. Never mind. He's here.
A motion then to approve the agenda as amended, moved by Marula, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Seeing none. Any declarations of interest this morning? Seeing none. So I look now then for approval of the minutes of our September 19th meeting as presented, and I have Councillor Maria Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to advise my committee colleagues that at 11 o'clock I have a formal consultation review that I will leave the room, attend, and be back as soon as I can. Thank you.
Councillor Pauls.
Thank you. I also have to leave around 11:30, but I'll be back as soon as I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of committee, you have before you consent items 7.1 through 7.8. I'm looking for someone to receive that. Items 7.1 through 7.3A and B. Moved by Mayor Fred Eisenberger, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All opposed? All in favor? Any opposed? Sorry, we had planning yesterday. Any opposed? Carries unanimously. May I please have a mover and a seconder for 7.4 through to 7.8. That's moved by Councillor Pauls, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? And that's carried without opposition. On to public hearings and delegations. And now we would like to welcome, I believe for the very last time, Dr. Patrick Dean, who is our president still of McMaster University, and he's here to speak to item 8.1.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here with you and to have made it on time. I always enjoy this opportunity to come and speak to Council, and I'm grateful for the opportunity you've given me each of the last several years. I'd like to begin, if I may, by congratulating all of Council, returning councillors and newly elected councillors. The work of supporting and advancing the cause of the city we recognize is challenging and difficult, and I greatly admire your own commitment to the city and to the good of the citizens of Hamilton in taking that on. I would say, you know, the university would not be here, would not be doing as well as it is doing were it not for the city and for a long history of support from Council for the university. It's been my custom over the last several years to share some news about the university with you, and then I'm happy to, of course, answer any questions you might have about the university and its work. So I'll begin, if I may, just making some comments on the global rankings of universities. We've managed to improve our standing in many global university rankings yet again. This is important to us for several reasons. Not only do parents and students use international rankings as a guide when they're picking an institution in which to study, many other countries and institutions are also eager for their top researchers to partner with top schools in those leading 100 universities. So our ability to continue building the strength of the university is very much linked to the way in which our reputation is confirmed globally through these rankings. So having said that, I'm very proud to share that McMaster improved its ranking to 77th in the world rankings published by the Times Higher Education out of London this year. So that puts us 4th among Canadian institutions. If you look beyond the context of Canadian institutions, that puts McMaster in the top half of 1% of universities worldwide, there being somewhere around 16,000 universities globally. We also maintained our status as Canada's most research-intensive university for the second year in a row. This is a way of measuring the amount of research that gets done in the institution, adjusted for the size of the institution. So the investment in research made per faculty at McMaster is more than $400,000 per faculty member, which is twice the national average. More than twice the national average, I should say. McMaster, though, is not only about our research profile and achievements. We were also honored to receive this last summer the prestigious Global Teaching Excellence Award. So here, an international panel selected McMaster to receive this award, which was presented to us in Edinburgh in August of this year. And it recognized our strength in experiential learning and our commitment to global engagement. It was a recognition, too, of a long history of teaching excellence at McMaster, teaching excellence and innovation. So these accomplishments, both on the research side, the rankings, and the teaching side, underscore our commitment, as we say in our advertising, to creating a brighter world through both our research and teaching excellence. And again, I would say we couldn't reach these heights without the support of the city and our broader community, and everyone in this room has in different ways contributed to the university's success, for which we're very grateful. I'll turn now to a topic which has been very important to me over the last 9 years, and that is the issue of the university's dedication to community engagement. In 2016, we formed the Office of Community Engagement, and I've been thrilled to see the coordinated and principled engagement activities that have been taking place among students, researchers, and faculty in the community. So we see community engagement as having multiple sides, but two critically important ones are the advancement of research in partnership with community organizations and individuals, and also moving our teaching into the community, as a result of which our students derive the benefit of experiential learning, and we're able to continue to collaborate with the community in the development of the city. Community engagement has become embedded in the university as I anticipate my departure. I'm often asked, is this a passing obsession of one president? It's not. I think it is now deeply embedded in the university across all programs and representing all areas of McMaster. You've all been given a copy, I believe, of the Office of Community Engagement's 2017 annual report and a book called Pathways to Collaboration, a guide to help community organizations navigate the university and find ways to work with McMaster researchers. An excellent example of that kind of partnership and more generally of our community engagement efforts is CityLab, right adjacent to City Hall here. And I'd like to just take a moment to recognize and to thank you all for your support of CityLab. That is a great initiative, not only as a partnership between McMaster and the city, but also McMaster and our sister institutions working together for the good of our community. In the CityLab, students, city staff, and community stakeholders work together to create solutions that support the city's strategic priorities. And then, in a similar vein, we have the McMaster Research Shop, which pairs teams of students with non-profit and community organizations to help answer research questions of organizations that can support their priorities. Connecting our students with local opportunities and prospects is one way we can work together to attract and retain our talented graduates. We need to show them that our city has many exciting career opportunities, and we need to convince as many of them as possible to make their homes and their professional lives here in Hamilton. I'd point across the street a continuing point of pride, I think, for our partnership with the City of Hamilton at the David Braley Health Sciences Centre, another example of our working together with our city partners, where we were able to create attractive jobs and opportunities, and also in the process improve the delivery of healthcare and health education in our city. Similarly, as part of the ongoing strategy to bring part of the operations of the university downtown, at 1 James Street North, we have the home of our Centre for Continuing Education and hundreds of administrative staff. We're also delighted at the prospect of building another high-quality McMaster facility to add to the university's presence in the downtown core, and this, of course, is the graduate student residence, which is being built, or is planned to be built at the corner of Bay and King Street. This Council's help and partnership, I'm confident that more graduates will see Hamilton for what it is, the perfect place to begin their professional career and to settle after graduation. The McMaster Innovation Park is entering a new phase in its life. It celebrated its 10th anniversary a year or two ago. So in addition to our work downtown and in Westdale, we're excited about the future of the Innovation Park. It is already, I think, deeply embedded in Hamilton's economy. It is the headquarters for the Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster for Southern Ontario, in which both the city and the university are partners, and you may remember that that initiative, which has attracted over $200 million of federal money, has leveraged that money for a total of somewhere around $800 million for economic stimulus in the area embraced by the supercluster, and that it is headquartered at the Innovation Park is, I think, very gratifying for all of us in this community. We were very pleased to welcome Ty Shattuck as the new president of MIP. We're looking forward to great things in the years ahead. He has a great vision for what can be achieved there. So I'll just conclude with the observation that, I often go back to the history of McMaster's location in Hamilton, that we were brought here by the citizens of Hamilton in the late 1920s. It is still true, as it always was back then, that our success is the success of the city and vice versa. Hamilton's economic success is McMaster's and our success is yours. So we're very much looking forward to working with this new council, and on behalf of the whole university, I want to say again many, many thanks for your support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, President Dean. Mayor Fred Eisenberger.
Thank you, and President Dean, thank you so much for your ongoing efforts to develop the relationship between the city and the university. And my only question is, where does Queens stand in the rankings? And I think our future mission is to make sure that we top you at Queens somewhere down the road.
Well, you might wish to see entered in the minutes the observation that in the Maclean's rankings this year, McMaster jumped over Queens into 4th place.
There you go. Okay. So. And we intend to keep it that way. So. But we wish you well at Queens. You're going back to where you came from, actually, when you came here, and you have served this community and McMaster University spectacularly well. And your legacy, in fact, there are many, and I think you've touched on some of them, but having set up the Office of Community Engagement and that kind of embedding that into the organization, I think will be your enduring legacy. And I think you put a lot of time and effort into that. It's been well noticed and well appreciated, and your legacy for having improved not only McMaster's standing, but McMaster's reach into our community is very, very impressive indeed. So thank you for all that effort, and wish you well at Queens.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm exceedingly gratified by what's been done on community engagement in my time here. And that network of community campus partnerships was a very unusual way of structuring a unit in the universities. They're usually very hierarchical. And we thought for the whole point of penetrating into the city as much as possible, we needed a different model. And it has worked, and many thanks to everyone who's contributed.
It's probably a model others are going to emulate, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Dean, thank you so much for your years of service and for the great partnership that we have with the city. I have a question for you, though. Out of all the time that you've spent here, and it's not really that long, what is, in your estimation, the greatest achievement?
Yeah, 9 years has passed very quickly. It's 8.5 now. It'll be 9 when I'm done. I would say the nature of the achievement is that I've worked hard to integrate all the parts of the university. So research is not just something that is about global rankings, and it's not about arcane topics removed from our community. What I wanted to see is that the high-quality global research work we do bears fruit in our community, that the outstanding teaching that goes on in the university is done in partnership with the cities. So in a way, I'm going back to the point I made earlier on. I do think that it's the greatest source of satisfaction to me will be to have helped coordinate the different components of the university, not only to elevate the academic work we do, but to bring benefit to the city of Hamilton, and that has been really important to me.
And it's been very important to the city overall to be able to share in that achievement. You know, McMaster, and we say this often, that you're like the best kept secret, you know, that to Hamiltonians, you're well known, McMaster's well known internationally for outstanding research and innovation, but locally to our own folks. And what I have noticed is that there has been a concerted effort in doing more outreach and, you know, engaging more with the Chamber of Commerce and you know, different businesses to really share in that success and to become a little more knowledgeable about it. So I thank you very much. And just one last question. When do you transition out of the area?
I will be, my last official duties at the university will be convocation in June. And so it'll be after the middle of June I will disappear, and as of July 1st, David Farrar, who's the current provost, will serve as president in the interim. And the university will be in very good hands.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, Mr. Chairman, the great work you've done here in our community. Hamilton's on a resurgent, and a big part of that is the recognition that McMaster University gets. And I think you played a significant role in making that happen. One of my favorite achievements is that building across the road. We sit and stare at it all the time. But it was nice that the city made a contribution to that. It came to life, and it helps, you know, a lot of the people who don't have family docs, gives them a location right near the McNabb bus terminal for an opportunity to get medical care. And from the doctors that you're training, and you're also able to graduate more doctors now with that facility. So I think that's a big check mark for your career, because I know you were very instrumental in getting that downtown. And so thank you for that. Just one other thing I want to touch on with you, and I'm sorry to bring it up, but I think we need to just get your reaction to this in public as you're leaving, is I finished up a 5-year tenure as chair of the Hamilton Police Services, and the new chair hasn't been elected yet, so I'm going to pose the question to you. You have that event every spring, I think it's called, not sure, the homecoming, and where your students pour out onto city streets and probably consume too much alcohol, but it causes a lot of fear amongst the residents, but it puts a huge strain on our police resources also to manage that. Is there any way that, I know you very much control what goes on campus and issue permits for it, and you control it very well. Can we not shift that back into the campus, since it's your students, rather than coming out and putting that load on the police? And also, and you know, I know Councillor Johnson was always a big issue for him, and I don't know whether Councillor Wilson will touch on this also, but it's the one negative thing that sort of happens out there that we need to get our arms around. Thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, Councillor. This is a perennial challenge in cities with a large university in them, and in the neighbourhoods that surround them. We've worked hard there are a large number of people who work hard to try and contain student behavior, whether it's at homecoming, which is I think in the fall, then there are other events in the spring that tend to be occasions for these kinds of parties. Our Dean of Students works very hard to manage student discipline and planning so that there are occasions on campus, because I do think that one solution is to provide on-campus occasions for students to celebrate and so on, and by doing so to spare the neighborhoods. The issue is, in a way, that most of these parties are not organized. So the university can sponsor, or the student council can sponsor events on campus and hope to draw large numbers of students to those. But my experience here and my experience at Queen's, where this was an even more acute problem, is that, especially in the age of social media, parties occur anywhere. And they are not planned, nor do they necessarily have an organizer. They are spontaneous things. And I think there's a lot the university does to try to contain that problem, and we respect the difficulties it causes for the neighborhood. And I know, even though I'm moving on, that will continue to be a priority for the university, because I won't pretend there's an easy solution to it, because students, when they're not on campus and not engaged in their university-sanctioned activities, are private citizens. But there are many things that can be done to at least reduce the severity of that problem. The best thing I can do is provide you with the assurance that it is taken extremely seriously. We work with the Community Advisory Committee, PACA, on these things. So often after an event, there'll be a debrief with the neighbors who serve on that committee, and we try to learn from that and implement changes next time round.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I know it's a problem at the universities too. I've seen the news reports coming out of Brock also. But clearly McMaster is a leader in Canada, if you're rated number 4, and we always are challenged with new technological problems, and this is social media, which is a way for the students to communicate this, but it's just not fair to those neighbors. Do you not have a code of conduct where if you go off campus and misbehave and become arrested, there's academic or university consequences for that?
The Code of Conduct governs students on campus and when engaged in university activities. So it affects the way they conduct themselves with each other on campus and so on. It doesn't address their behavior as private individuals when they're off campus unless they are representing the university in some way. So, for example, a sports team visiting in another city, if it misbehaves, then the students will be dealt with under the Code of Conduct because they were to all intents and purposes, part of the university, engaged in university activities when they behaved as they did. It's also the case that at universities there's always a distinction made between penalties for academic offenses and a different set of penalties for non-academic offenses, and they tend not to be confused. So, for example, students don't tend to be penalized in an academic way for some kind of non-academic behavior. We look at this issue all the time. I think a code of conduct is a useful and important thing. The real issue with these parties is culture. It's culture. It's changing the culture. The culture of student drinking.
We're able to do that with Frosh Week. It seems to have really been toned down from what it used to be.
Yeah.
But this one, I'm glad to hear that you're addressing it and you're trying to deal with it, but the perception is it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And it'd be a challenge for your successor, and I just wanted to get an update from you now, and I see Andrea's here. She might be able to take it back to the new president and try to figure out a way to be leaders in the university world in dealing with these where they spill into the community and don't have respect for the community, we need our police doing other things, not out doing that stuff. And so thanks again for your commitment to our city.
Sure. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. As the attendee of many of the very last MAC organized quad homecoming event on campus, I can tell you that the mayhem that ensued, it was understandable that was then discontinued. It was many decades ago now, but wow, what a night. We have a few more, they ran out of cuffs, MAC 5.0 did. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. I think this morning is a time for us to give thanks to Dr. Dean and his service and his leadership, and I know there will be plenty of opportunities to do that, as there should be, prior to your departure, but I just wanted to say it now for the record. That's what I believe the focus should be on. I would like to, as a proud MAC undergrad, say that McMaster is not only a citywide asset, it is a magnet for this region, and it should be recognized as such. It is part of what our history, and it certainly is going to be part of our future, and then some. I would also like to give a personal, your outreach into the community, your application of the study and the work within the community, both for the students and the residents, is a model which I applaud. It's very, very valuable. And your Office of Community Engagement, from personal experience I have had, is stellar. I can't say enough about them, and I would like to give, through you, thanks to them. And I know it's because of you that they have been supported and do the work that they do. So thank you so much. I do also think, and I have said before, we all have roles and responsibilities. It certainly is in part of our social contract with the students who come here to study and apply their studies to make sure that we provide them with a healthy and safe place to live. And that is our responsibility. And I take that responsibility seriously in terms of how they're housed, where they're housed, how they travel. And I'd like to underscore that responsibility for this council. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I equally want to thank your contribution and leadership with MAC, and we often talk about this, we just heard about the social contract and the engagement piece. But I want to highlight a couple other things that haven't been talked about in regards to contributions to this committee well beyond the things that have already been discussed. So first of all, I appreciate a lot of the research. Right now, we have a large senior population in the city of Hamilton. Alzheimer's, dementia is a growing issue, and the science and the understanding. And now we're actually moving towards built form to try and address and meet those needs now and into the future. And part of that is very people that work at McMaster University. And one of the things I'm proud of is when you talk about culture, there's a culture within the organization in itself. And when you have individuals, stellar individuals, that move on from McMaster and continue contributing to this community, I mean, I don't think we've ever quantified that. But I can tell you there's a number out that has left MAC and continue their contributions in this community that haven't been recognized, and probably at some point we should. But that is a testimony to the quality of individuals you're not only hiring at the university, but the commitment to this community. And I really want to thank you and make sure that we don't lose sight of the ongoing contributions of many of the individuals that work for MAC.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have myself on the speakers list, so Councillor Whitehead, if you don't mind, I'll just, you've turned yourself. If you don't mind, I'll activate you. I basically just have one comment leading to a question. Oh, you're already activated. Thank you. President Dean, this is probably a message in the preamble more to our 4 new councillors. Brad Clark doesn't count on this one. But you can imagine running for the first time and emphasizing certain platform ideologies, and for me, one was integrating McMaster into Ward 2 in the downtown. And one of the first meetings that I had the opportunity, once getting elected that first time, to have here around this horseshoe, featured a delegate in the brand new President Dean, and he talked at length about what we're talking about here today, and I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. I couldn't believe that all of these synergies came to play in very short order, and we've had many discussions about this, and it's worth highlighting again. since. We've had the Braley Center in Ward 2. We've had the newish continuing education in our downtown in a great location, which is now becoming a hub with all the work that Steve and Dave and his wife Maureen are doing across the road at the former Sirloin Cellar. Your startup that you sponsor, the Forge on James North. The pending grad student tower at the southwest corner of Bay and King, which is extremely exciting, and of course City Lab. Now you referenced most of those, but I think it's worth mentioning again, none of which were on our agenda until you came to town. So this integration that you spoke of, the need for, and that mandate that you were working on still at the time, has gone well beyond my wildest expectations and even beyond whatever I discussed when I discussed my platform over 8 years ago today. So I can only express my greatest gratitude in your departure, but not only with the work that you've done, but standing before us here today telling us that integration and that mandate will continue. So thank you immensely. It's very important, I think, to our city and particularly our downtown. I do have one question through you, Chair, and it'll be the last time I ask you. The southeast corner of Bay and King. Councillor Ferguson had kind of made reference to the fact that we invested $19 million. It's 20. We held back the $1 million for the time when it were to come to develop the what is now an asphalt parking lot, obviously serving a great purpose, mostly for your folks at the southeast corner. But it was an incredible investment. I was very, very grateful to my colleagues who 8 years ago or 7 years ago decided it was a sound investment, and certainly with well over 54,000 visitors coming to the core, the doctors that are now available to people that didn't have them before, the training that goes on, and especially the partnership with public health, we made the right decision back then. It was a lot of money, but we held back that $1 million, hopeful that we would soon develop and someday develop the southeast corner. So any update you can offer at this time will be my final question to you, President Dean.
Thank you very much. So that site and what might be built on it is very much a matter for discussion on campus. The university remains committed to doing what we said we would do on that occasion. I think you'll understand that there are issues to do with available capital to do such things, and also to think about how we would conceptualize such a building. So my answer is that it is very much under active consideration and discussion on campus, and as soon as the university is in a position to do there what we undertook to do, you will see action on it.
Wonderful. Given the preamble, I almost didn't want to ask, but congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Chancellor of Queens, it's the perfect spot for you, and we have very much appreciated.
Bring the chair back to you, Councillor.
Thank you. I'll take the chair back, and we'll move to receive the delegation.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Whitehead. All in favor? That'll carry. And now a discussion on item 10.1. Anybody? This is the Advisory Committee for Persons with Disabilities report. If not, I need a motion to refer 10.1 to staff for review and report back to future GIC. Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Thank you. Can you just repeat what you just said, please, because that was my question.
Item 10.1. Did you have the whole preamble on the MAC thing?
Yes. Go ahead.
We're looking for an Advisory Committee for Persons with Disability report referral to staff to review it and report back to general issues. Would you like to move that? Okay, moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? That's carried. 10.2, looking for a mover and a seconder on 10.2, moved by Councillor Whitehead, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Mover and a seconder for 10.3. Westdale Village, BIA, moved by Councillor Whitehead and seconded by Councillor Pauls. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. 10.4, moved by Johnson, seconded by Councillor Marula. All in favor? Any opposed? It carries. King West BIA is 10.5. Looking for a mover. That is Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, it carries. 10.6, a mover and a seconder. As amended, we'll remember the amendment from earlier, moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Any opposed? You have to indicate. Any discussion respecting item 10.7? Should I remove myself from the chair? And no, huh? Mover in Councilor Marula, seconded by Councilor Collins. All in favor? Well, fair enough. Moved by Councilor Vanderbeek, seconded by Councilor Collins. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. 10.8, moved by Councilor Jackson, seconded by Councilor Pauls. All in favor? Any opposed? It carries. Hosting the Grey Cup. Any discussion respecting 10.9? We need a mover. Councilor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So two questions, just curious now. It's under right now Director of Tourism and Culture. So I'm just curious, the business case for hosting the Grey Cup through tourism and culture. So is facilities obviously going to be a part and parcel of that? Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you. To the acting GM, Carey. The acting director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, facilities will be involved.
Okay. Is this the appropriate, so is there any questions here for facilities at this time, or that will be part and parcel, Mr. Deputy Mayor, of the feasibility report being brought back? I'm in your hands.
Madam Clerk.
Through Mr. Deputy Mayor, you can ask questions on this report anytime you want. Like, it's before you now, so if you have questions on this report, you certainly can.
Yeah. Okay. I guess my simple question was, and is facilities available? They are. Okay. So facilities would come down, please. I would ask Rob Gatto, I'm simply wanting to know, before we go further down the path, what would be, in theory, a tremendous event to have back in our city. I've read different reports, mixed messages. I just want to know the feasibility of the stadium being able to accommodate the Grey Cup physically with the appropriate number of seats needed.
Rob?
Simple question, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Good morning. So part of the construction...
Rob, why don't you introduce yourself, especially for the new members of council, please?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rob Gatto. I'm the manager of sports and entertainment, and golf and stadium is under my portfolio.
Perfect, Rob. Thank you.
Part of the construction, part of the delivery was to show the stands if we were to host a Grey Cup event. That did not happen. But having said that, what we need to do from facilities, we would hire an architect, a structural engineer, and to take a look at the facility to accommodate if we were looking to get 6 to 10 to 12,000 more stands, which would be temporary seating.
Okay, so the range of seating, Mr. Deputy Mayor, Rob, Manager Gatto, you've said 6, 10, 12,000 from your discussions or through your network with the CFL, through our ownership here. That range you've just given allows us to at least have a conversation about the feasibility of hosting it. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through you to Rob?
That is correct. Thank you. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, then that's all I need for today to allow 10.9 for me to support 10.9 at this time. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I must admit, Rob, and this is no condemnation whatsoever on anyone, but when we finally got the stadium built about 7, 8 years ago now, I must admit, with all the renderings I saw, all the discussion on what unfortunately became a very contentious project, but it's up and running, and most of my football buddies who attend it, regardless of location, say it's an awesome stadium. We've had great concerts there as well, other events to follow. I must admit, Rob, all the discussions back then talked about enhancing the 24,000-seat stadium someday to about 40,000, and that it was doable. Pictures, renderings, everything indicated that that was part and parcel of the future. And what you're indicating to me today is nothing really was officially provided or supplied. Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Rob, just for the record, please.
That is correct.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, Councillor Jackson got ahead of me, just asked you pretty much the same question I was going to ask. As chairman of the Stadium Committee, I clearly remember conceptual plans showing the scaffold seating on the south end. That was the biggest addition, and a little bit in the north end on each side and underneath the scoreboard on the north end to be able to put this up. I don't know what the big engineering issue is, because you just lay stringers on top of the concrete and then put scaffold seating back up. And I know the scaffolding suppliers will supply engineering drawings and that. So what are you missing? Because we did see conceptual plans of how it would be laid out to go up to 40,000 seats to host a Grey Cup. Am I dreaming that, or is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The only thing that we received was a picture, of the stadium if we were to host a Grey Cup. But having saying that, so if we were to host a Grey Cup, there's no spec from the CFL to say that you need clearly 40,000 seats. So we would have to go through the permitting. You would need a permit to get temporary stands. There would have to be
Oh, yeah, no question, you need a building permit.
Stamp drawings.
You have to have engineering drawings on the scaffolding that would host these. It's like the Canadian Open goes through the same thing.
We would have to look at our facility to facilitate, say, in the north end where the video scoreboard is, say we could put 10,000 fans there. We would look at our south end and say, you got to remember that. Say if a ticket's going to be $200, what's that ticket going to look like and feel like for someone that's going to, buy that ticket, right? So I was out in Ottawa back in the 2017 Grey Cup, and I sat in their temporary seating, and as far as AV, you couldn't really hear clearly the play-by-play. So you got to really look at all the aspects of hosting the event, because it's all about the fan experience.
No, I get that, Rob. I'm just trying to get my head around before I support moving this along. I agree the end zone seats won't be great seats. They never are. But that's where we saw the conceptual plans. And quite frankly, that's why the forecourt of the south side is so large. It was to accommodate that temporary seating to host the Grey Cup. So that's why I'm puzzled to hear, there's no stamp drawings that come in from a scaffolding supplier that would put these up all over the place for all kinds of major sporting events, whether it's the Molson Indy or the Canadian Open or any other major event where you have temporary seating. But that forecourt was designed that big to hold that scaffolding, and to say now that it won't, I'm puzzled by that. And so as part of the report back, I would love to see those conceptual drawings that you have that were presented to the committee and ultimately onto council when we saw the conceptual plans that were presented by the architect before it went into detailed construction. So would you be able to provide those in your subsequent report?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll check, but all we received from the consortium, the construction folks, and IO, was just a picture of the stadium showing stands. There was no...
It was a conceptual plan.
Yeah, but we didn't receive no stamp drawing actually saying this is how we would incorporate the seating at the stadium. So we got to look at egress, degress, how that looks with the seating in the south and north end. Like, it's all possible, it's all doable, because they put up temporary stands for all types of facilities, no different than they did for the Grey Cup in Ottawa. So we would do the same here, whether, in both the north and the south.
Well, it makes me feel better, Rob, you say it is doable.
It is doable.
Yeah.
Anything's doable, because they put seating on sides of hills, like, when the Tiger Cats were in Guelph, they put 12,000 seats there on hills of grass. So,
that was just on grass, not on concrete.
in Ottawa, they in their east end zone, it was on the side of a hill.
But you already have the concrete in the forecourt,
Yep.
a large
It's
area.
doable. Everything's doable.
Okay, thanks all. That's my questions.
Good questions. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so the license agreement between the City of Hamilton and the Hamilton Tiger Cats indicates that they would make commercially reasonable efforts to bid on the rights to host 2 Grey Cups during the first 10 years of the license agreement. Is there anything in the license agreement that binds us to an amount of money that we're supposed to spend on a Grey Cup, or are we supposed to be financially supporting a Grey Cup, or is this all on the Tiger Cats' dime?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would have to look at that. There's nothing specific in the 20-year license agreement that says that the City of Hamilton has to, there's no price tag on that.
Okay, so by supporting this today, we're simply getting a business case back, and that should indicate if there's any desire from the Tiger Cats to have sponsorship from the city, that would be included in that. we're not approving any spending of money at the moment other than on the business case.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Councillor, that is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Danko.
Reading through the analysis and rationale for the recommendation here for the hosting the Grey Cup, there's a couple statements that I just find fairly surprising. So in particular, the CFL estimates an economic impact to the host community between 80 million to 120 million, with numbers from recent Grey Cups in 2016 for 80 million in Winnipeg, and 100 million in Ottawa to the city of Ottawa in the province. I've been to the 96 Grey Cup. It was a great time. I've been to Grey Cups in Toronto several times. I just find it really surprising that those numbers, the economic impact is that high. So when this comes back as a business case, I want to make sure that those numbers are well delved into, referenced, and are verified.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as part of our information gathering, we are looking at the economic impact figures that are being provided by the CFL. We're also in contact with other host cities for economic impact figures from them as well.
Thank you.
Good question. I got myself on the speaker's list. Councillor Whitehead, I'm going to activate you. Just one quick question. Along those lines, I'm a believer it's the greatest Canadian party annually, in the economic impact is reported on each and every year. Usually it hovers around that 100 million, but I'm glad that the previous councillor asked that question because I know we'll be able to show it. If we're able to show it for premier Ontario festivals like Supercrawl with economic impacts around 15 to 20 million, we'll be able to show it, I think, for a week-long greatest Canadian party and validate those numbers and those reports from Winnipeg and Saskatchewan and others. But my question specifically to that request that's ultimately going to fall before us, that's fallen before all other municipalities, they're always partners in some way, either in kind or in cash, is that can we be confident moving forward with approval here today that our ask is going to be consistent with recent historic asks to those other municipalities, which my understanding is around 1 to 1.5 million in kind or in cash. We're not going to have an overly onerous ask of us here in Hamilton, are we, or is it going to be consistent?
To the Chair, in response to your question, we are gathering that information from other municipalities, other levels of government as to what their support was. It varies dramatically over the last few years. One thing that we are keeping in mind in our reporting back to the upcoming GIC is the CFL is now working under a different model for awarding Grey Cups. In the past, it has been a rotating geographical allotment. And as of last year, it is now a competitive process.
Lucky us. I'll take the chair back. And Councillor Whitehead, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, it's not new to the city of Hamilton. We've hosted the Grey Cup before, and I hope that we can review what those. I believe we lost money in the last Grey Cup. So I want to make clear when we're talking about the ancillary dollars. That's not a direct benefit to taxpayers of this community. That's a quality of life issue, and that certainly will help the hospitality and the restaurant industries and so forth. But at the end of the day, the taxpayer will continue paying taxes the same level they always have. There's no net impact on them. So I want to make sure we distinguish what the benefits are and who gets the benefits. And that analysis, I think, needs to be done as well. And I'm not suggesting it's not a good investment. I'm a big supporter of the Grey Cup. But I think that I like to be more transparent when we throw numbers out. Who are the real benefactors in the context of those numbers? So, and then the question is, how can we leverage that better than we have in the past to, whether it's jobs for people out of employment, or whether it's affordability. There's a lot of other issues that I don't think we've really tackled in regards to how we can leverage this so-called economic uplift through that period of time to ensure that some of those dollars flow down to the very people that we're trying to help. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Fred.
Just to get it on the floor.
Mayor Fred, say that again. Sorry.
I'm going to move the recommendation to get it on the floor.
Seconded by Councillor Marula. And go ahead, Councillor.
And then just a quick comment. I mean, I'm sure people are familiar with what economic impact is and always has been for all the events that we've actually encouraged in our community, including Country Music Hall of Fame, awards nights, super crawl. So I don't know, I think our staff quite understand what economic impact is and how to break that down and make sure that we reflect on all the issues that are important to that. It sounds like some people have heard this for the first time, which is kind of stunning to me, but in any event, we are clear that economic impact really means how that spreads benefit throughout our broader community. It's not really a tax-base oriented issue. It's an investment in promoting business in our community, and always has been and always will be. And the assessment we'll make is, whatever the number is, whether it's in kind or cash, whether that has the kind of cachet and value that this council is prepared to support. So I really appreciate all the great work our staff are doing. They're coming to us with the right direction, which is let's go and evaluate all the benefits, all the potential costs, all the in-kind contributions, everything that's associated with that, how it plays out in our community, what the spin-off is, and what a week-long football party notwithstanding, will mean for not only the standing of our community, but the benefits that it can accrue throughout our city. So I'm delighted to move it along and anticipate it coming back to us with a fulsome report on how this plays out in our community and what our costs and benefits are going to be. Thank you.
Second time, Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, I sort of felt that was a bit of a shot, and I'm not sure if it was meant to be. My point is, Mr. Chair, is I supported the Super Crawl and the funding for the Super Crawl. I've supported Grey Cup. All I'm asking is what can we leverage? Who is the biggest benefactors in the context of the dollars coming in? So there's more transparency in the context. So I'm not suggesting it's not happening, but I don't think we've ever done it in a robust, transit and comprehensive way so that the average taxpayer sitting at home understands it. So we understand it. I just want to make sure we articulate it to the broader community. Thank you.
It may be helpful, Kerry, to get a Ministry of Tourism past and Culture economic impact assessment for something like the Junos or Supercrawl and let the councillor overview the breakdown from those assessments. So it's not just us that measure economic impact. There are federal and provincial qualified people who assist in that. And you'll see that it's robust, but you've been consistent when it comes to your theories on measuring economic impact, and it is appreciated, Councillor. There's no doubt about it. So thank you. I'm going to go out on a limb and also thank the Hamilton Tiger Cats at this point. No one has yet, but that unfortunate, but I say for the most part amicable lawsuit is now behind us, and at the earliest possible date, they've made efforts to follow through on Bob Young's promise many years ago to host not one but two within 10 years since that's been available to them. So I look forward to supporting this here today, and with that, the mover is Mayor Fred Eisenberger, and the seconder was, I'm sorry, Councillor Terry Whitehead, his nemesis on this issue. All in favor? Any opposed? Sorry, Madam Clerk.
Mover and seconder through Mr. Deputy Mayor were the Mayor and Councillor Marula.
Oh, sorry, that's right. Mayor Fred Eisenberger. And Councillor Marula, for the record, he attends more Ticats games than any of us. He even has a shirt that has his name on it. Any opposed? On 10.10, as noted, the changes to the agenda of item 10.10 has been withdrawn. 10.11, we need a mover and a seconder for the 2019 tax-supported user fees. Councillor Pearson.
I'll move it, Mr. Chairman, but I do have a question.
And who would like to second it? And we'll get it on the floor. Seconded by Councillor Collins. Go ahead, Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a question on the fees. I just want to ask, because I know we get these every year, but it's always something jumps out at you. On page 30 of 71, Appendix A, it has fees for the, I'm assuming it's the fire department for inspections. I'm just questioning, I see daycares, foster care, but it's showing for residential buildings with one dwelling, two dwellings. Can I just get clarification what this fee is for, and when does it get activated? On page 30 of 71, Appendix A.
Let's have any staff below our general managers introduce themselves and their positions.
Yeah, my name is John Verbeek, Deputy Chief with Hamilton Fire. So the question with respect to the licensed daycares, these are daycare centers that are licensed by the province.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but going down the list, it has foster care group homes, and then it goes down to item 23 as a residential building with 1 dwelling, residential building with 2 dwellings. What are these inspection fees?
So those residential buildings are, for instance, we do get requests at time for inspections of residential buildings that are undergoing a sale, and that's the fee that we charge for those.
Oh, okay, so somebody would call up and instead of, those independent inspectors that go through a house to tell a potential purchaser, this is an issue and that is an issue, someone could call the fire department and say, we want you to inspect this home for us?
That is correct. Sometimes with sales of properties, we do get requests from either real estate agents or lawyers requesting inspections of those types of properties.
Thank you. Yeah, and then I see the different ratings as it goes up in the, I can understand the high-rise buildings, et cetera, but I was surprised to see the dwellings, because the fire department still does the inspections on residential homes when you tour the wards or tour the areas, correct?
Yes, we do. Those inspections that we do, they are specifically for educational purposes as well as for smoke alarm installations.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. I had a question concerning the fees for the golf course. I was wondering if someone could help me on staff for that.
Rob comes back on that one. Is he still with us? Dan? Okay.
Page 64 of 71. You're welcome.
Just going to go get Rob Gatto, who was speaking to the stadium issue, the last issue. He'll come back and assist.
Yeah.
Wilson, what page was that again?
Page 64 of 71 in Appendix A.
Councillor, are you okay if we go to Councillor
yes.
Ferguson and we'll come back as we wait for that staff? Thank you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was remiss in not doing this at the start. I wonder if the clerk would be good enough to note that I have a conflict of interest on page 10, under, or is it page 13? It's page 14, which is taxi cab owner renewal. So I'll declare that.
Noted. Thank you. Thank you, Clerk. Thank you, Councillor. And, Rob is back. So sorry, Councillor Nan, if you can turn yourself off. And Councillor Wilson, if you can press your button again, I'll be able to activate you. There you are. Mr. Gatto, you have a question from Ward 1's Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to know, because I'm not a golfer, it says that there's no change in fees proposed due to market conditions and trends and to stay within the market value throughout the golf industry. There's pretty much changes on every other fee, including our bus passes. And I just wanted to know if you could tell me a little bit about these market conditions, first of all. And second of all, if you could enlighten me on, in proposing no additional or increase in fee, how that puts Hamilton compared to other comparable public golf sites.
Through you, Mr. Chair and Councillor Wilson. The golf courses over the years, since we took over, we did an internal team bid back in 2006. We got an extension to run our business case through 2021. We've retained consultants to look at the industry. The golf industry has been on it's been on a downward trend over the years. And we've looked at our memberships, our green fees. We want to be consistent with the rest of the golf industry, so we're staying within the market value there going with the 2% increase. So if you look at the 0% increase, say on a 18-hole pull cart, a power cart, that's within the industry standard. So to rent a golf cart is $34. That's pretty much the standard throughout the industry. If we were to put a 2% increase, we're going to see the golfing community, the green fears not come out to our facilities. So we want to stay within the market value for a golf cart, a pull cart, and then you look at our sunset rates. So that's a time where if a gentleman or a lady would like to come out to golf, say after 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, they want to get in as many holes. So I can't see us increasing that rate, because again, that's extra revenue after a 4 or 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock to get in, say 12 holes, 15 holes. So that's why we had no 0% increase on those rates.
Thank you. So you're saying, just so I understand, that golfers are price sensitive, and a 2% increase would diminish the number, would have an impact on the number of golfers, which in turn would diminish our municipal resources?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you very much. Could you answer the second part of where those fees place us compared to other courses in the region?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're within industry standard right across. If we were to look at the Knollwoods, the Southbrooks, Scenic Woods,
Are we right in? I don't mean to be picky, but because I'm not a golfer, I don't know what an industry standard fee is, and I'd like to know, if I had a chart of the fees, are we near the bottom in terms of what we charge? Are we kind of in the middle, or are we kind of at the top?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, if we, Councillor Wilson, if we look at our rates compared to all the other rates, and that's public golf courses, we're above the middle or right up at the top. So a golf course like Kings Forest, where we charge a good green fee rate, we're getting that for a premium rate on a weekend. And if we look at Shadote, both the Badeau and Martin golf courses, we're priced right.
Thank you. One additional question. You opened your remarks by saying it is an industry, for lack of a better word, in flux, and membership, did you say membership is overall declining? Where are you?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. Membership has declined because now there's so many golf specials. Everyone runs a golf special. There's specials on Golf Now. There's Under Par, so where different specials come on through the websites, the golf websites. You're able to purchase a green fee and a card at a reduced rate. So all the golf courses are doing that now. Even private golf courses are doing it, where at one time the private industry didn't allow green fees only on certain days. They've opened their tee sheet because everybody's faced the same issues with the downturn in the golf.
So just clarify for me again, because I'm not a golfer, within that context, how many publicly owned golf courses does the city have?
We have 2 at Shadote, 218, the Martin and Badeau course, and 118 at Kings Forest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson, you're next. Sorry, somebody jumped.
My apologies, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I was just checking with the Acting General Manager of Finance. So on page 9, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I didn't know if anybody was here from Animal Control Services. I see Director Leenders up there, but I didn't even get a chance to ask him. I was just going to ask, under dog licenses for seniors and disability rate, they want to put it up. I know it only seems like a small amount of $1. However, we've frozen it over the years, obviously, because many of our seniors and those with disabilities are on limited disposable income. So any form of an increase would cause hardship. And at that time of their life, especially with seniors, the compatibility of having pets at home, I can't tell you how therapeutic it is, and the companionship of it all, especially for those seniors that are lonely. So the one comment off to the right there says, concerns regarding this practice has been expressed by the general public. I didn't know how to interpret that, Mr. Deputy Mayor, by people criticizing that those rates have been frozen over the years, or was it from the seniors and those with disabilities saying, please don't increase anything because it'll cause some financial hardship. We may not be able to be pet owners in the future. So with that long preamble, Mr. Deputy Mayor, is there anybody here from staff that can possibly help me?
Ken?
Oh, Ken, thank you, Ken.
Through the chair, actually that comment actually comes from the general public, not the seniors, saying, you know, why such a difference in between it. So that rate hasn't gone up in 3 years, so we're just asking it for it to go up $1 more, so up to $16, compared to $34 and $70 for unspayed. So.
Okay, well, Director, I really appreciate you clarifying that was from the general public. I mean, I can't imagine anybody from the general public. I don't recall my office having any recorded complaints from the general public about some kind of a discount for seniors. So I'd like to keep that frozen, Mr. Deputy Mayor, if the will is just to carry on, because I know it's just $1, but for those with very limited disposable income, many seniors as shut-ins have their cat, their dog, that's all they have. Any kind of an increase will be a hardship. I know it sounds minuscule, but if there's no will to keep that frozen for another year, I'll just ask if I could, on that one little part, be recorded as opposed. Thanks, Mr.
Can you identify, you're more than welcome with a seconder to move that amendment at this time. Can you identify, is it item 1?
It's item 3 and 4 there.
71, item 3 and 4?
Yep, you'll see dog licenses for seniors and the disability rate, items 3 and 4 there.
So freeze at previous level would be the motion and seconded
for another year, and then maybe if I could get support for that.
Seconded by Councillor Clark, all in favor?
Carried. Thank you, and I will work with staff to see exactly the uptake and exactly if that's truly impacting budget or whatever, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Anticipated and appreciated. Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry to cut you off there. Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to build on the point that Councillor Wilson, I think, was making, my question to staff is, when we're taking affordability into account for one industry, in this case, we're talking about the golf fees, but we're not taking affordability into account for something like recreation fees for rec centers or for transit users. I have a fundamental problem with that, and I'm kind of wondering how staff determines which user fees we take affordability and promotion of that activity into account, and which ones where it's kind of ignored.
Would the acting general manager, city manager, Mike Zagaric, like to answer this?
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, you'll see through some subsequent budget deliberations that affordability is captured when setting rates, for instance, with transit. Is staff survey comparator in other municipalities with respect to our ranking of transit fees. In addition, we have dedicated programs whereby there are funds set aside to subsidize transit or recreation for low-income individuals. When looking at recreation some years ago, the City of Hamilton had some of the lowest recreation fees, and in addition to having some of the lowest recreation fees, we also had dedicated affordability programs whereby we are subsidizing recreation for certain individuals. One of the issues is whether or not it's best to provide subsidy to the general public through discounted fees or to provide subsidy through dedicated programs. When we subsidize fees, generally, you're providing to the subsidy to those who require subsidy as well as those who don't require subsidy. So for instance, when I register my children in the City of Hamilton Recreation Spring Camp, I'm receiving a subsidy in addition to those who may require subsidy. So again, you'll see through the budget deliberations that we provide subsidy through lower user fees as well as dedicated programs.
Thank you.
Thank you. And no further questions, so moved as amended by, who wants to move the report as amended? Moved by Collins, seconded by Jackson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pearson. There's now an amendment, so moved as amended, Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Jackson. And Madam Clerk.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, the movers and seconders were Pearson and Collins.
All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Members of Council, now we're on to 1012. This is the appointment of members of Council to the Board of Directors for the City of Hamilton-owned corporations. I need a mover. Item 1012, Councillor. Take your time. You want to move it? Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Pauls. We'll just give... okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. We need a mover and a seconder respecting item 10.13. Moved by Councillor Whitehead, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Councillor Pearson.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we just got this report this morning and I just whipped through it real quick. I just want to be sure, and I will take it offline with staff, but it mentions a figure for shoreline protection, a number of areas, and I'm assuming these are shoreline protection that's been recognized. I've had some residents raise some concerns in the Winona area, and I'm not sure if they're included in here. So I just want to be sure going through it forward, and I'll follow up with staff. I can follow up with staff afterwards. I know there's a couple of locations in the existing part of Ward 10. I had the Frederick Avenue unopened road allowance. I think there's the 50 Road unopened road allowance, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a couple of other spots that I just got calls on where we have storm drains going out to the lake, and there's city property on either side that has no protection. And it obviously affects the residents that abut that. So maybe, I'm not sure of the address because I don't have the address in front of me, but I think it's off of Seabreeze.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I'll just start and then Cynthia can add to the councillor's questions there. My apologies for bringing this report so late. The January 11th timeline really jammed us up for schedule here, and that's why it's before you in the manner that it was. We wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to apply for these funds, so certainly apologize for the short timelines, and I think Cynthia can address the Councillor Pearson's questions.
Thank you.
Your position, Cynthia.
Oh, through the chair. Yes, I'm the Cynthia Graham, Manager of Landscape Architectural Services in Environmental Services through Public Works. To address the councillor's question, we have 33 identified locations across the city that would be part of this study. Through direction earlier this summer, we are undertaking a shoreline study to evaluate the required needs of those shoreline locations. What we're asking is to be able to make the application to apply for the funding to help support the work that we would be anticipating. With respect to Seabreeze, there is a couple locations identified on Seabreeze, and what I can do is circulate the address list after the meeting today rather than run through them.
I appreciate that because I just got the call, I think not even 2 days ago, and I was going to meet on site on it, so just catching that together today, and I appreciate taking it offline and speaking with you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just a little concerned about the amount of money involved in this, particularly the city's portion on a walk-on report. If I'm reading this right, it says under the recommendation that's 157.3 million, of which the city's portion is 62.9. If you go to page 2 under financial, it says the city's portion is 94.28. So my first question is, why is there such a big disconnect between the recommendation and the financial description in the report?
Dan or Brian?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies for that. If it's not clear, the 62 million would be what we would attract through the funding, but the city's port is what we would get through the funding, but the 94 million would be the city's contribution, but that is over a 10-year period.
So we're committing $10 million a year for the next 10 years, or $9.2 million?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, this is in principle in order to get our place in line with the funding. Council every year will have the opportunity to say yes or no to these projects as they come forward. We tried to be strategic about it, so the only commitment that you're making for 2019 is the $150,000 that will be associated with the design for the Harbourfront Trail. the balance of which you'll be able to review every year and determine whether or not there's an affordability issue with them or not.
Okay, I didn't have a chance to read this, to understand it. There's an error in the city's portion between the recommendation and the financial information, because you go from 62.952 million in recommendation A to 94.28 million in the financial section.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think what we were trying to say is that the amount of money that would be funded from the feds would be the 62 million, but our contribution would be the 94. And in total, it equals 157. So my apologies if that wasn't clear in the recommendation.
Okay, Mr. This really concerns me that we have a walk-on report where we're committing $92 million. And I've been around long enough to know that these kinds of recommendations come back to haunt us, because 3 years from now, some staff person is going to come in and say, well, back on December 11th, 2018, you approved this. Where's the source of funding for this $9 million per year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it depends on, some of this is funded from the rate budget, some of it is funded from the levy, depending on which portion of the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund we've applied through. Some of it will come from the rate, some of it will come from the levy. And again, that's why I opened with the apology of the late timelines with the election and the ability to get this information in front of you. The timeline was very tight because the deadline is January the 11th.
Okay, I don't know what to think. If we're committing up to $9.2 million per year, what have we done in the past number of years for this fund, the disaster mitigation?
To you, Mr. Chair, I'm unaware that this fund has been available before. I believe we became aware of it after the events of 2017 where the lake levels were at record levels. My sense is that inspired some of the reason why the DMAF was released, was to help with these types of things. I think the federal government was observing that municipalities were enduring a lot of shoreline damage as a result of wet weather and the high lake levels.
And the only reason you're suggesting we get involved in this is because of the federal funding portion.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. And again, every year, Council will have the opportunity to say yes or no to the affordability of these projects.
And so are we committing $9.2 million for 2019 budget?
You, Mr. Chair, no. The only commitment we're making for 2019 is the $150,000 for the detailed design of the...
which we approved this week.
Hopefully through you, Mr. Chair. That's the goal.
I don't know. These are big numbers. And I don't know what we're approving or not approving, particularly when it's a walk-on report. And I get the fact that you had to wait till after the election and we've been shut down, but it makes me terribly uneasy because I don't understand it. So I don't think I can support it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Well, hopefully with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more councillors asking questions, we'll tackle the reasons why, and somebody will reference global warming at some point. Maybe it'll be Ward 1's Councillor Wilson. You're next.
Yeah, I seem to be the poster child already after a week of having to raise climate change and the need for this city to have a plan. And I share Councillor Ferguson's frustration. At the same time, I understand the parameters with which staff have to work in, and there is a timeline set by a senior order of government, which always necessarily dictates our spending, if we enter into it, our spending priorities. And if we do not, as a city, formally adopt, A, that we recognize climate change to be real, B, that what, as a public corporation representing the citizens of this city, are we doing to change the way we plan, budget, and manage our infrastructure in response to that. And in the absence of doing that, we are going to continuously get into this, right now, this dilemma of having walk-ons, responding quickly to a fund as it becomes available, not knowing whether it fits into our plan and our priorities as a community. And just a minor point, I'm glad to see the use of the word climate change in a plan, as opposed to what I have been seeing in city reports
an old reference to 100-year-old storms as a reason for responding to infrastructure. There are no more 100-year-old storms. We're having 5-year storms. Right? And that is my frustration. So my question is, through you, Dan, so you're seeking approval, or we have approved already 150, okay? Just so I understand the sequence here.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the $150,000 for the detailed design of the Harbourfront Trail is within the 2019 capital budget request. That will be approved hopefully in the next several weeks. The balance of this is approving in principle over the 10 years with money. The first significant amount would be 2020 for, I think it's the $6.8 million for the Harbourfront Trail. The lakefront properties, the shoreline along the lakefront, we have a planning level budget of around, I think, $24 million for that. But as we move through studies and more detailed design on an annual basis, we will continue to bring back those projects with firmer numbers, and hopefully we'll be able to participate in the DMAF over the next decade when we try to resolve these shoreline issues. Again, if council deems any of those on an annual basis, deems any of those projects to be unaffordable, we can take them off the list.
May I ask that members of council during the meeting please exit through the anterooms, because when there's things going on, staff can't hear, the councillors can't hear, neither can I, and it affects the recording when there's other things going out in the lobby.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So the DMAF program, as I understand it, it looks at large-scale infrastructure projects, and there's a minimum cost of $20 million for the project to be considered. We have a number of projects here that are under that $20 million, so have the feds indicated that we can bundle them all together like they do with my cable and go from there, or do we still, are a number of them just going to be disqualified because they don't meet the minimum 20?
You, Mr. Chair, that remains to be known. We did respond through an expression of interest, so they've already seen the way that we're packaging this up, and we were approved to move forward to the next phase. But you're absolutely right. They may deny approval for one. All of these, we're not really sure, but they have seen several of these projects through the expression of interest phase that we've already completed.
Is there a set dollar figure that they're assigning to larger urban municipalities so that it's an equitable amount of money, or we're all competing and then it's politics at the other end?
Through you, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, I don't think I can answer that question. We're just unaware of that.
The last question, so we submit proposals, a number of projects. What's the process that the federal government does to assess them? Do we understand that process, or again, is it just they're trying to be fair?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they do have their criteria. Unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me right now. So kind of what goes on behind the curtain is we're not really sure whether or not there's going to be proportionality with respect to the size of the municipality. My sense is that that's not the case, just because it depends. I think a lot of these projects are going to be waterfront related. But I don't have a firm answer for that.
And in terms of a previous question with regards to the total value, are we required now in advance of these submissions to make a commitment to that 40%? Is that the automatic assumption that everything that we're now submitting, we're on the hook for 40%?
You, Mr. Chair, I think that would be decided on an annual basis as our budgets get approved on an annual basis. I suspect there's going to be some push and pull as we go along here, because it is over a 10-year period. In my experience with some of these funding programs, as we go along, some projects may drop off and others may come on. I don't know if the feds are going to have that kind of flexibility, but it's been my experience that they have in the past, as long as it meets the spirit of the funding. So
the 10-year capital plan that they're talking about, historically the feds and the provinces don't actually fund that way, because every 4 years there's a new government or a new administration. So do we actually have any commitment from them that this program's going to stay in place, or again, we're working with what we have and hope that the best comes out of it?
Mr. Chair, we're working with what we have and hoping the best comes out of it. And again, I think a year from now, there's likely going to be changes on the individual projects if indeed we are approved. And I'm hopeful that they have that same flexibility that they've had in the past.
So, a final question. So, to be clear, the feds will pick a number of projects or projects, then indicate that we're approved, and then we have to have the discussion about the financing or possible debt to finance those, and we're not committed until that time.
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good questions. Councillor Whitehead. Yeah, and I think I want to focus on the latter piece, because we just had presentations on our contribution with, was it ATA for the transportation, the barn, and the pressures, and we might have to give up projects as a result of our capital capacity. Already, we've identified that. So in light of that, how have we built the potential of our contribution to this program if we succeed in our capacity on that capital program in the next 10 years?
So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, the short answer is that the potential City of Hamilton, if the City of Hamilton were to receive confirmation that the overall ask were to be supported, with respect to our contribution, the $94.43 million you'll see in Recommendation B, staff are suggesting that it will have potentially two impacts. It will drive up the capital or operating budgets, subject to the nature of the investment. If it is capital and can be debt supported, it would drive up the capital budget. If it is not capital, in that I can't issue debt for that asset, it will have an impact on the operating budget. So looking at just raw numbers, $94 million over 10 years, if the City of Hamilton were to get support over the whole entire $157 million, $94 million would represent probably an additional 1.25% levy increase.
Thank you. Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so I can better understand some of these projects that are being applied for and the point of the fund. So basically the point of this application is we would be leveraging 1/3 funding from Infrastructure Canada for a number of city projects. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, it's actually 40%.
40%. Thank you. So looking at the list of projects here on the table, the major one there that's not already included in the capital budgets that we've already been looking at is the $30.8 million for the shoreline protection.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. It is, I'll make the distinction between the harbor front and the lake front. Currently, the harbor front, we have the $150,000 for the detailed design in 2019. I think we have $6.8 million in 2020 to actually do the work. The balance of the lakefront shoreline projects, we only have planning level estimates for those in around $24 million. So as we move through time here, we'll get a better understanding of what those actual costs will be.
So through this application, we're looking at leveraging 40% towards the lakefront shoreline protection, which was identified in a previous report that I remember seeing coming to the Budget Committee. Just a couple questions about some of the projects that are listed here. Could you maybe give me a brief outline of what we mean by escarpment stabilization work?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I guess the Claremont would be one example of that, the stabilization that we have to do there. That was certainly the one that had the most profile, but we have that condition at a number of locations where we have some of our transportation corridors, so that would be an example.
Okay, and the number of structures, bridges, and culverts that are listed here, there's quite a few of them. Were those added to the list based on their undersized, their impediment to stream flow or to water flow, Or are they also cross-reference with the age and condition of the structure?
Mr. Chair, in order to be successful with the application, we've characterized those projects as the adverse effects of high water levels affecting the abutments and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thank you. So I just want to recap where we were. We have incurred millions of dollars in unanticipated operational and capital costs related to climate change issues. I know that we spent over $1 million operationally just in dealing with the water levels, the water table levels on the beach strip 2 years ago now. I know that we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, Mr. Chairman, in your ward dealing with those same water table issues associated with the trail repairs. And of course, you know, the escarpment from year to year, depending on what the weather's like. We've spent millions of dollars operationally on investigations, temporary repairs, and in some cases permanent repairs. And I know that when we dealt with the beach strip funding, I'm pretty sure the motion that council directed staff, I believe the motion was something along the lines of, we're now incurring all of these costs on our own, many of them unanticipated, many of them coming out of reserves or coming out of year-end variances. And I believe the direction was, senior management team, please go off and find out whether there are ways and means in which to offset our operational costs with provincial and or federal dollars. So can I just ask that this was this was council's direction to go off and look for opportunities to offset costs that right now we're paying 100 cents on the dollar.
Dan.
You, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay. So I don't want to beat up on staff in terms, I understand that this is late in terms of, you know, ideally this would have come through the regular process. We would have had an opportunity to properly, you know, do our due diligence and ask questions, but this was our direction, to be fair to staff. We had asked to help because we're incurring all kinds of costs, and it's not just a couple of dollars, we're talking millions of dollars, and we can probably go back almost a decade if you start to include even the backwater valves and some of the other issues that we've initiated here locally in response to climate change. And so I thank staff for going off and finding ways and means in which to try to offset city costs. I like the fact that there's discretion moving forward. I think Dan has emphasized the fact that we're not locking ourselves into anything. I've yet to see the shoreline plan for the beach strip that was referenced earlier, and I know that, you know, engineers and those that we hire are offering us information that says, in a perfect world, if you could afford everything, here's the blueprint in terms of how to do that, and there's a price tag to that. But I take comfort in knowing that there's some discretion. Obviously there's an affordability issue on our end, and there's some discretion for council to say that on a prioritized basis, these are the projects we want to move forward with. We're not going to be able to get away from some of the shoreline improvements that are required on the beach and in the West Harbour. We're not going to be able to get away from, on an ongoing basis, the escarpment costs that continue to plague us year after year from a budget perspective. And so I'm quite supportive of what's in front of us here, and I'm hoping, I don't foresee the federal government giving us everything on this list. So I certainly take to heart what Mike has mentioned in terms of some of the financial pressures this would place on us if they funded everything on the list. That's definitely not going to happen. So I'm comfortable moving forward knowing that we'll have an opportunity in more detail to start analyzing which projects are top of the list and which ones we can afford to take advantage of if in fact the feds are supportive and provide us with 40% funding. So I'd be prepared, if you don't have a mover at this point in time, to move the report that's in front of us. And I want to thank staff for coming back proactively in response to the direction that we had provided earlier this year.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, I think I identified a mover and a seconder already on this.
Yes, you did, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Your mover was Councillor Whitehead, seconded by Councillor Pearson.
Okay. Okay, Mayor Fred Eisenberger, please.
Thank you. I can't say any better than what Councillor Collins just said. Climate change is a thing. We're going to have to deal with it one way or the other. And in my view, it's preparing ourselves to deal with these issues as opposed to waiting for them to happen. But my question is, and I think this would certainly put this into context, in terms of climate change issues, I mean, can we calculated how much we've already spent? And some of the, the issues that Chad talked about, the escarpment, we've done a number of times. The freeze-thaw cycle has been devastating on the escarpment crossings. The shoreline issues, we've had flooding, many flooding occasions now throughout the city. Avoiding those, I think, is going to be a cost saver for us, not an expense. So have you tallied up, what we have spent to date in terms of mitigating some of these issues just out of our own 100% dollars?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't done anything recently that I can give you a firm number. From my own experiences, really starting back in 2004 over the last 15 years, I think the price tag's north of 100 million. But we haven't done an analysis of that.
I think it would be helpful just to put this into context because there's an equation to be made here. I think this will be over time a money saver as opposed to us waiting for an event to happen and then having to do a hurry up offense and taking it out of reserves and we really have to we have to react at that point as opposed to making the upfront investments so that we do not have those kind of occasional events in the future. So I would ask that as you report back on this, that you give us a reasonable calculation on what we've spent to date, and that would include combined sewer overflow tanks. I mean, it was one of the very significant issues that we dealt with in the 90s that talked about discharges into the harbor and water, and the flooding amounts that we were experiencing, and the investment we're making in our sewage treatment plant. All of them related to, in fact, increased volume, not just from development, but from the increased volume of rain and precipitation that we're getting on an ongoing basis. So I think the number would far outstrip the kind of investment that we're contemplating here, especially on the city side. So if I could ask through you, Mr. Chair, if our staff could come back with that kind of a number, I think in my head it's well beyond $100 million, and I think that certainly would put this kind of initiative, a positive initiative, into context.
Looks like they're indicating that wouldn't be a problem, Mr. Mayor. First time, Councillor Marula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm a little surprised that we're having this in-depth discussion on this particular item, only because this is worthy of being a consent item based on the importance of it. We should all be just endorsing it, and just to give you some chronological background, 2004 is when climate change was addressed by council. In the East End, we hosted literally thousands of homes being flooded, and the first phase of the climate change impacts was sewer backup. So we had raw sewage in people's basements, and we set up a storm event response group with all experts on the panel itself that made recommendations to council with respect to capital needs as well as subsidy programs, and that's where the Backflow Preventer Program was born. So just in East End alone, we spent tens of millions of dollars. I think the $100 million is a little low in production, but it's always better to be conservative. But I look forward to that full amount. I think it's literally hundreds of millions when you're dealing with particularly what we're doing at the water and sewer treatment plant, so which is a $300 million expense. So subsequent to the sewer backup crisis that we've been able to mitigate and eliminate, and I can say that with a great deal of confidence with the recent storm events that we've had, we had the surface flooding issues in certain parts of the city, whether it be in Stony Creek or whether it be on the mountain and other areas. And then, most recently, we had the shoreline flooding. That's become the new climate change impact, which we've taken very proactive steps on as well, in Councillor Farr's area and Councillor Collins, who's worked diligently on this. So the work's been done. This report that's before us is a reflection of that work and mitigates the inevitable cost of trying to fix the problem. And that's why I'm a little surprised by any opposition to it. So we know that the problem exists, but what we're trying to do is try to mitigate the impact on the general levy by seeking partnerships with upper levels of government. So why we've taken this long to actually approve this is a little surprise to me. But having said that, this is nothing but a good report, and I want to thank staff for the report itself. This is governance and being proactive as opposed to reactive, which maybe that's what's confusing people. But this is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. So I look forward to supporting it, and I appreciate your time.
Keep your mic on. I'm going to pass the chair to you. I'm on for the first time, but you've said it all, Councillor Collins, Mayor Fred. So I'll just, on just one aspect of this proactive approach that began as referenced by our previous speaker many, many years ago, but really more recently, and as it relates to the waterfront, through council motion in their previous term after that April storm. But just to put it in context, really the only option other than making this investment and now having followed through and finding we can have upper level partnerships in the funding, which is really truly important and derived from a council objective. We're basically saying just don't bother and don't fix what even in Ward 1 and 2 is at peak about 7,000 users per week, a widely hailed and used trail both recreationally and from a safe commuter standpoint. And I don't think there's anybody in any of our wards in this city that would not want to fix something that is so widely embraced, such as the West Harbour Waterfront Trail and obviously the Beachfront Trail. So just as an example there, we had that trail closed, large swaths for months, from April through to I think it was August, and then we had portions of it you could use, but then closed parts where asphalt is literally crumbling, falling into the water, and where on one Sunday evening it was measured, I think 70 residents in an unsafe way, which we never want to see, we're climbing those closures. So, the only other option is to do nothing, and obviously I don't think there's anybody around this table as it relates to capital improvements needed as a direct result of global warming that would want to go with that option. They would want to react, and I think we have in the past, and we should continue to invest in making substantial fixes that take into account what we're up against here with global warming and climate change. So with that, second time, I'll take the chair back.
Thank you, Councillor Farr.
Councillor Wilson.
Just respectfully, I appreciate the comments, but a climate change strategy is shifting from, it's not being proactive to what we're reacting to. It's being proactive. So the irony shouldn't be lost on anyone, and it's not lost on me that part of our, what's listed as a project fund is the construction of a bridge, which cars drive on. So a proactive climate change would have us just from a macro budgeting and planning perspective look at whether we want to build more bridges and how many more bridges are going to be compromised. So while I appreciate the comments, I just wanted to make that one. Thank you.
Ferguson.
I'm not saying we do nothing, as I think it was a suggestion I heard from you, Mr. Chair. My issue is that we sometimes spend hours talking about a $100,000 expenditure. Here we got $92 million and considers it a walk-on item, and everybody's high-fiving about it. And so that's the part that worries me. This should come right out of left field, just like the construction of the courthouse at $32 million, right out of left field at us. And I keep hearing the poster child for this is the waterfront trail that got damaged. And on that waterfront trail, what happened was we had high lake levels, higher than we've had in years. We had a very strong northeast wind, which doesn't happen on a regular basis, which pushed the bay water up and washed that trail out. And from what I've heard, it's $150,000 now to fix that trail. So to make sure we don't have to spend $150,000 in the future, we're going to spend $5-6 million to do, it just doesn't make business sense from what I'm hearing. But because this walked on, I didn't have a chance to talk to staff, understand it thoroughly, because some of it just doesn't make sense. I have trouble supporting this today because I'm not making an informed decision. So it's not that I want to park on it. You can fix it for $150,000, but you want a permanent fix for $6.5 million. Maybe every 20 years when you get a strong northeast wind with high lake levels, you spend $150,000 again. Don't know. So this really concerns me, walking on these big numbers and without us being able to get informed and understand it better.
Councillor Nan.
Thank you to the chair. I can appreciate that we have
issues that we need to respond to. And I can appreciate the content of the report and the recommendation from staff in terms of, in some essence, catching up to the impacts that we're already seeing with climate change. That said, I'm not sure procedurally if this is the appropriate time, but I think one of the tensions I'm listening to across this table is about the need for us to prepare a climate change framework, for us to understand in terms of what we can prepare for, but more importantly, a planning framework for the decisions that we need to be making moving forward as a council. So that's one procedural question I would have to the chair about that.
Good one. Okay, so on staff, acting city manager, Dan, have we've definitely had conversations over the years, but have we formally made efforts to identify areas to be more proactive in the question the good councillors asked?
Maybe I can start through you, Mr. Chair. So I believe it was last year Public Health had started the climate change process that is reminiscent of the remedial action plan that we used with the harbour. I'll ask you forgiveness. I don't know what's on the work plan for 2019, but I think that was the intent of that work that Public Health was doing, was to create a framework that emulates the RAP so that the city will be more prepared for that.
Anybody else? Paul?
So through the chair, yes, and within that was even more specific around an adaptation plan. So how climate change will impact all the departments, and we need to relook at the way we do business in order to address the new realities of the climate change that's going on. So in the work in the global sense around climate change, yes, but specifically there was direction around what our adaptation plans are going to be across the departments. That is work that's on the docket for 2019.
Oh, Dan, once more.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. So I think there's a lot of projects that are ongoing right now, and I'll reference the citywide drainage and master servicing study. So from a flooding and drainage perspective, that's one big piece to help the city become more resilient to future effects of climate change. So I think the work that Elizabeth is doing in her shop will put her arms around all these things that we're doing, and then through that we'll be able to identify if there's any areas that we're missing, whether it be with energy, whether it be with flooding, shoreline protection, that kind of thing.
So to clarify, there's a 2019 report coming, or there's a report coming in the new year that help the rest of council understand the frameworks and adaptation plans for resiliency, but also planning and budgeting.
Through the chair, yes.
Related to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Second time, Mayor Fred.
Yeah, just to follow on that, we've had a climate change action plan in place for quite some time, actually. There's a whole range of issues that have been rolling out in all the various different departments. What we decided to do last year was partner up with Burlington and create a climate change remedial action plan, which is reminiscent of the remedial action plan in the harbor, to bring together all the partners that we will need to take it to the next level. So I think we've determined that we've made a certain significant contribution to are making changes in our operations for climate change, and now we're looking at partnering with Burlington to kind of take the next steps in terms of what that climate change action should look like. So we have a joint climate change office at the new Net Zero building at Mohawk College that is staffed by our staff, Burlington staff, and City of Hamilton staff as well. And they're taking the next level of work to the next iteration that we're going to need to be working on. So I would suggest that for those that aren't aware, that we provide all the actions that we're taking relative to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions that we've been doing since I've been here, quite frankly. And there's a pretty robust plan, and there's a 80% reduction target for 2040. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and all of it related to climate change. So if I could ask, I was Mr. Montgomery, that was no longer here, I don't think, was heading all of that up for us up until recently. But Brian Montgomery, right? I'm not sure who, it has transferred over to Dr. Elizabeth to kind of take it to the next level, but there is certainly a comprehensive report out there that speaks to all the actions we've taken.
Through the chair to the mayor, yes, Trevor Imhoff is now taking on that role from a day-to-day work perspective. Kevin McDonald is the director in public health responsible for this work. There's a ton of work happening. We were actually pleased. Some additional funding was put in place. As you know, the Bay Area Climate Change Office did receive a notice that their funding would be canceled under the cap and trade funding, but some funding has been picked up to keep that work going. All of the parties are committed to making it happen. So yes, work exists. But I think, as Dan pointed out, what we need to do is bring that kind of comprehensive umbrella back. So what you've been seeing at either Board of Health or Public Works or at Healthy and Safe Communities are the various glimpses of it. Why don't you let Dan and I take away how we might bring back a more comprehensive piece to, and maybe it has to come to a GIC in some way so that you can all see the various elements of it. That's part of the joy and the challenge of it hitting a number of different departments.
Thank you.
Second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if perhaps I didn't make myself clear the first time I spoke. Okay, so on September 1st, 2005, we developed a storm event response group, and the mandate that was approved was the independent community panel be established to work with staff for the following: to address cause and effect of inclement weather on them, storm management drainage systems in the city of Hamilton, to establish a communication strategy to assist in educating the general public on issues concerning risk management, compensation, etc., to review the City of Hamilton Stormwater Master Plan, to review and consult with the insurance industry. The community panel consisted of experts from the community in storm management, experts from the insurance industry, experts from climatology, experts from wastewater management, experts from other related fields as required. So, 2005, nearly 14 years ago, we took on the climate change issues as a result of the basement flooding in East Hamilton. We developed all these programs which were actually nationally renowned for. It's literally part of the curriculum in many of the universities in the country surrounding how to deal with climate change and storm events. Since then, we've spent literally tens of millions of dollars accordingly. And through you, Mr. Chairman, perhaps what we can do is just let's start from 2005 and everything related that branched off from this, and we can have maybe an orientation session, an in-service, just so people understand where we were, where we headed, and where we are presently, so that we don't waste their time and everyone around's time accordingly. So we can be proactive and try to increase awareness regarding what we've already done, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Fantastic. So can we have a historic piece as part of what we're all agreeing to bring to GIC with the previous speaker? Good. Seeing some nodding of the heads. Thank you, councillors. Second time, Councillor Whitehead, or first time? I'm not sure.
So, and I appreciate, I know that when I looked at Peterborough and in respect to what we faced on the mountain, and the independent panels they created there, I was quite involved in initiating the establishment of that expertise around the table, dealing with the climate events that we were experiencing. But I think that's the reactionary part in regards to how we prepare. I think what I'm hearing around the table from a framework point of view, what are we doing proactively to participate in the prevention from a municipal point of view? And I want to also highlight, for example, low energy LED lighting and our traffic lights and those, carbon footprint. We've contributed. When you look at our fleets, our transit fleets, when you look, and I'm hoping, and we're reviewing our own fleets outside of the transit to ensure that climate change lens that lowers our contribution to the green gas, our contribution to the green gases, that we're already doing those things. And we can be more robust potentially, but the framework is already there, and I think most of the things we're doing in the last several years now has had that lens, and it's been demonstrated by some of the things I just identified. So I just want to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I forgot, Madam Clerk, who was our mover and our seconder on this? Was it Councillor Pearson who's now left? No problem. Didn't mean to catch you.
Through Mr. Deputy Mayor, it's Councillor Whitehead and Pearson.
Okay, so Councillor Whitehead and Councillor Collins, all in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Ferguson, thank you. Budget submission for the Advisory Committee for Persons with Disabilities. This is item 10.4, moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Nan. All in favor? That's carried. Any opposed? Seeing none. Now on to motions. We need a mover and a seconder for 11.1. This is the appointments to the interview subcommittee for GIC. It's moved by Councillor Collins and seconded by Councillor Jackson. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. That will carry. And then for the renaming of Ward 5. Councillor Collins, would you like to indicate so I can activate, please? I need you to indicate. Thank you. There you go.
Just reflecting the new geography from the ward boundary issue, and it's seconded by Councillor Jackson. Collinsville has a good ring to it, but we decided against it collectively.
All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none. And on to 11.3, I pass the chair to you, Councillor Collins, just because you're still indicating.
Yep.
It's all before you. I'm asking for some funds through the Bell Tower Reserve to help put together this wonderful second annual event by the good people across the ward, actually. It takes place in Corktown Park, but it's winter solstice happening on the evening of winter solstice.
And were you able to find a seconder?
I was hoping Councillor Jackson would second that.
He has shown an interest. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Carries. Thank you. Chair's back to you, Mr. Chairman.
And anybody want to, are we adjourning? No?
I have a notice of motion.
No. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. So right now I have a notice of motion. I'd like to waive the rules, please. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Brad Clark. This is regarding the NPCA Board Authority Directors.
I believe that's a matter of urgency, given it was on our agenda earlier today. Move to waive the rules. All in favor?
Thank you.
Any opposed? Seeing none, go ahead. It's now a motion on the floor, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, and I'd like to read it through and then speak to it, please, sir. Thank you. So this is the appointment of members to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board of Directors. Whereas the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, the NPCA, Board of Directors is comprised of 12 members from the region of Niagara, 2 members from the City of Hamilton, and 1 member from Haldimand County, as per the Order in Council dated 1994. Whereas Section 2.2 of the Conservation Authorities Act states clearly that boards are comprised based on population per municipality. Whereas per Assistant Deputy Minister Bruce Bateman's letter to Carmen D'Angelo, Chief Administrative Officer of the Region of Niagara, dated December 5th, 2018, the Order in Council 2706-94 is no longer valid and has been replaced with the new provisions enabling participating municipalities to make such decisions in accordance with the Act. And whereas, according to Section 2.2 of the Conservation Authorities Act, based on population within the NPCA watershed, the Region of Niagara can appoint 5 members, City of Hamilton can appoint 4 members, and Haldimand County can appoint 2 members. Whereas under the Conservation Authorities Act, participating municipalities are responsible for the appointment of members to a conservation authority. Therefore, let it be resolved that the NPCA Selection Committee for agencies, boards, commissions, and subcommittees, Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks, Deputy Minister of Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MPP Donna Skelly, MPP Sam Oosterhoff, the Region of Niagara Council, there's amendment in here, and Haldimand County, be advised that the City of Hamilton will be appointing 4 members to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board of Directors as follows. 2 members of council from wards 9 and 11, and 2 citizen appointees. And if I can speak to it, please. Thank you. So just to give you some chronological context to this, since the levy contributions has been in controversy at the courts, adjudication, there's always been how many board members now can the City of Hamilton have. It was always under the microscope. and there have been questions about the seats. So on November the 12th, the MPCA legal team sent a letter to the board stating that the ruling, the order in council, Niagara gets 12 and lays out the process. So Niagara Falls gets 2, Fort Erie gets 2. They never did follow that process. They just appointed 12 people on their board, and it was usually the mayors of their respective municipalities. In the letter, it also cites that the Conservation Authority Acts, which lays out the director appointments, are dictated by population within that watershed. So this is 2.2, section 2.2, 4.5, subsection 4.5. Hamilton's portion is 21%, even though we have in wards 12, 7, 8, 9, and 10, there's 112,000 people, over 112,000 people, so therefore we get 4. And that's why we chose wards 9 and wards 10, 11 representatives, because majority of that is in both their wards. So on December the 5th, the Assistant Deputy Mayor clarified that in fact the order in council has been nullified. All the rulings are voided. So therefore it needs to go back to the Conservation Authorities Act, which dictates the 5, the 4, and the 2 formula, 5 Niagara, 4 Hamilton, 2 Haldimand. But since that time, since December the 5th, I believe it was on December the 7th, the MPCA approved 12 more appointees from Niagara. But Haldimand also just passed a resolution. They are now, in fact, sending 2 representatives, going by the 5, 4, and 2. So I just wanted to bring everybody up to snuff as to what is happening. I want to thank Councillor Clark, who did some background on this and working with the 2 representatives from Hamilton on the MPCA. Directors Kaspersky and Beattie have been working on this file for quite some time about how many seats are we allowed. So finally it was Councillor Clark, newly elected Councillor Clark, who was in Toronto, got this information right from the horse's mouth, that in fact everything's been null and void, all the agreements in the past. We are now going to follow the Conservation Authorities Act, which means we have 21%, which means we get 4 directors. So there is in front of you, and I hope we get unanimous support.
Thanks very much, Councillor Johnson. And I do have folks that wish to speak to this motion, starting with Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to have to ask the question of Nicole. We have an ongoing, is that resolved, the financial piece that's still in the process?
Nicole?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, no, that matter is still before the courts and is being heard again in February.
Okay, so if we're exercising the conservation rule, I'm wondering if that runs afoul with the arguments we're putting forward on the dollars. Is there any conflict between this and the arguments we're putting forward in respect to our financial contribution?
Any conflicts, Nicole, or 2 separate issues?
They are 2 separate issues, but certainly we've reviewed them. We are basing this motion is based on the information that we've received from the minister in terms of appointments going forward. The other matters are dealing with historical review.
Appreciate it.
Direct from the horse's mouth. Okay.
I just want to make sure we're not compromising our position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ferguson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I find this very good news. And we're finally going to get the representation that we've deserved. So through you to Nicole. Nicole, does this mean that, that this whole issue on assessing Hamilton for their share for the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority based on our total boundary rather than our watershed, that decision was made by an illegal board? Can that not be part of your legal challenge on that now?
Nicole?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we would need to review that in more detail, Councillor. It's certainly, this is very new information in terms of the minister's position on this issue, so we can certainly take that back and advise, and if there is anything, we can bring that back to Council.
Because every other conservation authority uses watershed, where they were using the entire boundary of Hamilton. And of course, I suppose I can't talk about the details because it's an in-camera matter, but I think all us veterans at least know the background to this and why they made that decision. But clearly, if we have 4 from Hamilton, 2 from Haldimand, and they have 5, that vote could have been entirely different. on the board. So I would hope that we could challenge that, and I'm thrilled that Councillor Clark and Councillor Johnson going on the board, because maybe they could solve this at the board level rather than us having to push this through the courts, because it's just not right, you know. Halton pays based on watershed, Hamilton's on watershed. Why is Niagara different? And I recognized it hasn't been decided by the courts yet, but it's something that could easily be fixed to a resolution of the board with our 4 representatives and 2 from Halton. And so is Niagara challenging this, or is this a done deal? Through you to Nicole.
Nicole?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'm not aware of Niagara's position on this in terms of how they're going to move forward.
Because based on media reports, they appear to be dysfunctional where, you know, they just went ahead and appointed a new board anyway. And so does that concern you at all, Nicole?
And we're talking about board appointments. Is that your question?
Correct. They've already appointed 12 new members of the board with...
3 months.
Correct. Nicole, any comment?
No, sorry, I'm the Deputy Mayor. I can't comment on where they are, but certainly we'll see what the board does when it's appointed.
Okay, and recognize I can't talk about this in camera, about this whole lawsuit issue, but we may want to get a report back from Nicole on how this could influence our case accounts, because if they made that decision with the inappropriate number of representatives on the board, I think we should be able to challenge that. And I'm just a layman, I need a legal mind to be able to tell us that. But it's opening up an interesting can of words, because we can save all the cost of running this through the courts too, if our new board, constituted the way it is, can make the right decision and go back to a watershed assessment area.
All right, Nicole, you'll take that under his direction, under advisement? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I just really want to thank the 2 citizen appointees that have been working on behalf of the city all these years through what has been diplomatically stated as challenging times at the NPCA. I thought in my consultations with them and with Councillor Johnson and staff, quite frankly, that it was important that Hamilton make a formal statement to the NPCA and copy it to the minister, the assistant deputy minister, and the different regions and counties, that we recognize what the act says, we recognize that the assistant deputy minister has made a decision on that act, and that we are formally appointing 4 people to the board as per those positions, 2 councillors and 2 citizens. It was important that we do it today because we want to make sure that at the next NPCA meeting we've done our homework. Our 2 current members, based on our procedural rules here, will remain in that position until the selection committee can actually review. I'm not even sure if they're seeking reappointment, but we will have our 4 people there. Niagara has appointed 12. The Niagara region appointed 12 members. And I'm sure that our statement and speaking to the veracity of the interpretation of the act will go a long way to fixing this issue, given that the minister has also sided with our position. So I'm very pleased at where we are, and we'll see what we can do to fix up the NPCA and make sure that Hamilton's interests are considered.
Well said, Councillor, and I'm going to come back to Councillor Brenda Johnson, please.
Thank you, and I just have to clarify something. I did get a letter from the CEO of the acting interim CEO, Lisa McManus, and in fact, they appointed 12 new directors for a 3-month period. So that's just to put some clarity on that. But anyways, I hope I get everyone's support at the end of the day.
All right, thank you, and thank you very much to both of you, Councillor Clark and Councillor Brenda Johnson, for your good work on this. All right, folks, so we have the motion in front of us. We've waived the rules, and we now have the motion in front of us. All in favor? Carried. Anyone opposed? No one opposed. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I believe Councillor Collins, you're next with your notice of motion. You have it in front of you, and Councillor Whitehead, I'll come back to you. Go to Councillor Collins. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
And I need a motion to waive the rules because it is a notice of motion and I need to make it a motion. It is time sensitive.
Absolutely. Go ahead, please.
Waive the rules.
Motion to waive the rules. Councillor Jackson, and Councillor Brad Clark. Thank you. All in favor?
Carried. And it's moved by
carried.
myself, second by Councillor Clark, that Parks Department staff be directed to replace the vandalized Christmas lights in downtown Stoney Creek at an estimated cost of $5,000 to be funded from the Terrapure Compensation Royalties Reserve. So these were lights that were installed last year. They were installed from the reserve. I believe Councillor Conley came with a motion. They've been vandalized. Someone snipped them at the bottom, and the squirrels have been at them in the top. So staff don't have the budget to replace them, and so it's the same funding source that would have funded their installation last year.
All right, thank you very much. And Councillor Whitehead on this motion? Okay, I'll come back to you. So all in favor? Carried. Anyone opposed? Thank you. And Councillor Whitehead, please. Notice of motion?
Notice of motion, I haven't written up, but it's only logical in light of the renaming of our housekeeping on the naming of Ward 5. In Ward 8 and 14, Ward 8 was known as the West Mountain. So I am going to be bringing a notice of motion because I think we need to revisit the naming. I might be looking at Shadok, I might be looking at West Mountain, so I'll be working with the Ward 8 councillor to see what is appropriate, because it is confusing now. What is the West Mountain? So I just want to provide notice that I'll be working and consulting.
All right, and I think that would be appropriate that you work with the sitting councillor of Ward 8, Jean-Paul Danko. And thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Okay. We have any other notices of motion? One moment, please. Councillor Ferguson.
Just on a procedure thing, so I didn't hear what the notice of motion is, because I don't hear a specific name being recommended.
There is no notice of motion at this time. He is going to be
Well,
consulting.
it's not a notice of motion then.
No, it is not.
Okay.
It's just a comment that he raised. Okay? We have no other notices of motion, so we're moving on to general information. Madam Clerk, is that correct? General information and other business. And 13.1, amendments to the outstanding business list. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the amendments to the outstanding business list as shown in item 13.1, moved by Mayor Eisenberger, seconded by by Councillor Sam Marula. All in favor? Carried. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Hang on just a minute. Turn the page here. And private and confidential. So may I have a motion, please, to move into closed session? Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy Mayor. I just need a motion on the closed session minutes first. You can do that in open session.
Okay, in open session. So may I please have a motion to approve the closed session minutes of September 19th? Councillor Whitehead, Councillor Clark, all in favor? That... Oh, that's right, that's right. So do you want to speak to the minutes? All right, so seconded by Councillor Tom Jackson. All in favor? Carried, thank you. And you want to speak first before we go into closed session? Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you. So item 14.3 on the agenda is a report back to us on the investigation review, what went wrong, data analysis, mitigation, et cetera, for the compost plant. And I can't support going in camera for this report. There's nothing in the report from my perspective that raises any questions of potential litigation or litigation. It doesn't deal with any regulatory litigation. There's no solicitor-client advice, and there's no direction on a position or instruction for any negotiations. So I understand those three reasons and exemptions, but when I read the report, it's a straight update on what went wrong, what happened, and how we're going to move forward. And I can't see how that report should remain confidential. If we want to have discussions on solicitor-client advice separate from that report, that's fine. But this report, I don't see anything as to why it would be in camera.
All right, so I'm going to go to our solicitor and then our Madam Clerk for some guidance.
Through you, Acting Deputy Mayor. So I can, unfortunately, can't get into the details in an open session. The report does provide an information background so that there is a framework for the discussion on the potential litigation and other matters. I'm happy to go in camera and have that conversation with Council. And if following that, Council is wants to bring that motion or any of that information out of camera, that would be my advice at this time.
So, Nicole, I just want to clarify, though, because what the good councillor is questioning is the validity of the report itself, as it is on our agenda, having to go in camera. That's what his issue is. Can you comment specifically on that, please?
Certainly. In my opinion, it is appropriate to go in camera to deal with this report for the matters that are stated in the report.
All right, thank you. Now, I do have Councillor Marula who would like to comment on this. Do we need to move in camera for further discussion? Just some guidance here, Nicole. All right, so I'm going to come to Councillor Marula then.
So just quickly, and I think on the surface, what Councillor Clark might be mentioning might be merited, but if he had, I guess, once he has a complete understanding of the issue that's going to be revealed in camera, it'll be far more telling with respect to why. I have no problem having this open and transparent when the time comes, but we have to get to that point in order to do it. Because I'm very proud of what we've done to date on this file.
Okay, and I thank you for being very careful in your wording there, Councillor. I'll come to Councillor Whitehead is next, and then Councillor Clark for a second time.
So I think the face of the report in front of us is the subject of the conversation and direction that will take place in camera. I think the issue on the face of the value of this particular report, I mean, certainly it could be a decision in camera, but there's no reason why subsequent to the discussion we have in camera that this particular report cannot be released because it's just information.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, Acting Deputy Mayor, what I can say is I think it's important for us to have the discussion. I will make it very clear when we go in camera as to why and the rationale. There is further information that is coming to Council and more publicly following this, but it's very important that you have the information that I'm wanting to discuss with you in camera first, and then what is appropriately made public will be made public as soon as possible.
I think that's fair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nicole. So we are being advised to move in camera, and I'll come back to Councillor Clark for the second time, and then we will read out what we need to before we go in camera. Councillor Clark, please.
So to be clear, I'm not questioning that there may be other decisions that the council has to make with regards to potential litigation or other items. As a councillor, I get this report. The report is substantive on the investigation, the review of what happened, what went wrong, how to fix it. It does not deal with any of the items that the city solicitor spoke about. There is no advice in that report in that matter. There is no comment about potential negotiations in that matter. Everything in this report is simply an information report for council, and there is no reason why that report shouldn't be made public. As such, I cannot support going in camera on this report. We have to make decisions based on what we're provided. If the city solicitor and staff had provided us information indicating what the potential litigation is and where we're going, then that might be a different decision here. But we weren't provided anything else. Just the report, and it's an information report. So I wish to be recorded as opposed to going in camera on this item.
All right, Councillor, so I was just going to suggest that you can certainly be opposed to 14.3 as an in-camera item when the time comes. Councillor Marula, do you still wish to speak, or can we move in camera? Hang on. Go ahead, please.
Chair, so in the body of report, without reading it, it clearly states at the beginning of why they're requesting for us to go on camera. It's written in black and white, so it's whether it is or potentially is, it's right before us. So I don't want to give the impression that it's not there, because it is. And I trust the legal opinion on that.
All right, so we will vote to go in camera. I must read out a certain blurb, though. So may I please have a motion to move into closed session respecting item 14.2 and 14.3 pursuant to section 8.1, subsections E, F, and K of the City's Procedural Bylaw 18-270 and Section 239-2, subsection E, F, and K of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001, as amended, as the subject matter pertains to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the city, the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. Excuse me. So moved by Councillor Marula, seconded by Councillor Brenda Johnson, that we move in camera. All in favor? Carried. And opposed? Councillor Clark is opposed on 14.3, duly noted. Thank you. Madam Clerk, you have that? Thank you, everyone. Anyone not needing to be here, please gather up your things. Yes, all done. So members of the public will be invited to return to hear any further deliberations upon committee reconvening the open session indicated by the removal of the frosting on the windows and the elimination of the white noise. The committee will, in the event they are in closed session for more than 30 minutes, wait up to 5 minutes upon reconvening an open session before proceeding with the meeting to provide members of the public and the media time to return to the meeting room. All in favor? Carried. Any opposed? I did that already. Right. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. There you go.
Hey, folks, need a mover and a seconder on 14-2, that report LS 18038A, respecting the Christian Heritage Party matter, remain confidential until council approval. That's moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Danko. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. And on 14.3, that report 14.3A, that report PW 18098/LS 18059, respecting the Central Compost Facility regulatory update, be received, and B, that the report PW 18098/LS 18059, respecting the Central Composting Facility regulatory update, remain confidential. I need a mover. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, and a seconder, Councillor Vanderbeek. On the motion.
Councillor Clark. This new system. Opposed to B.
Thank you. Separately then, on A, all in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Seeing none. On B, all in favor? And one opposed, and Councillor Clark. On that, we adjourn. A motion to adjourn from Councillor Marula, seconded by Councillor